You're with Bridget Welsh, and I'm really delighted to have Achan Yang, the chief editor of Democratic Voice of Burma, here on Straight Talk Southeast Asia. Achan, thank you so much for making time in your very busy schedule to be on Straight Talk.
Thank you for having me, Bridget.
I want our listeners to learn, what's the story of the Democratic Voice of Burma? How was it founded, and how does it operate? The theme of our discussion today is about how media operates in exile, and particularly the unique challenges that they face. DVB is a leading survivor in this area and also thriver. Tell us about your story.
We've been in exile for more than 30 years. And I used to say, whether should we be proud of being in exile for so long? In fact, we were in exile for about 20 years. And then about 8 years, we were back into our own country. And then after the military coup in 2021, we have to come back to exile again. So we were like twice in exile. We started back in 1992 as a small shortwave radio station broadcasting from Oslo, Norway. Basically to counter one-sided military propaganda at the time in Burma. There was no freedom of speech, no independent radio station, TV station, not even a magazine or journal. Everything was completely controlled by the military government. To counter that, we started as a small shortwave radio station, basically to provide unbiased news and information to the people in Burma. And then we grow gradually because of the need for the freedom of speech and information inside Burma.
How do you operate in exile? You've had a tremendous impact, not only in bringing in more balanced media coverage of what's happening in the country and helping to push for democratization, but you've also faced unique sets of challenges as a media provider in exile. What has been the opportunities and the real challenges?
There are obviously lots of challenges, not just being in exile, but also when we were inside Burma. And one particular challenge is being exiled, like how to get news out of Burma. We focus on the country in the country, right? That's the story that we are bringing back to Burma. And with terrible, horrible threat for those who provide news, it's very hard to get the story. And being in exile, also, we're not on the ground. So we have to depend on our reporter who are underground. We call it underground reporter. And we also have to depend on the citizen journalists who provide news to us. We kind of like a hybrid, we have to depend pretty much on people on the ground. We do have reporters, but who are pretty much anonymous and walking underground. We also have lots of citizen journalists that we train. These are the frontline reporter or respondent. They provide us the news, and we in exile, we do all the editing, following the stories, verification. That is the biggest challenge that we have. The second biggest challenge is how to survive, how to get the money, how to fund this whole operation. And that is also another challenge.
Hope you're enjoying listening to this episode. If you want to find out more about previous episodes, you can reach this on the website, straighttalksoutheastasia.com. The link should also be available in the show notes. If you want to contribute to the production costs of the podcast, you can hit the link, Buy Me a Coffee. Every little penny counts. All that money will not go to me, but go to the producers who are helping me to put the show together. Thanks for listening. You've talked about how you train reporters and others. How have you been able to maintain access, and how have you been able to do verification? That's really a very difficult challenge, especially now with the conflict. It is in some ways arguably even more challenging than it was in the past.
The solution for that is to diversify the whole source of information. We have, for example, citizen journalist sources, but we don't rely on just one citizen journalist. We rely on several of them in the same area, for example. So if there's one story that come out, we can double check, triple check with different sources. These days, the military refuse to talk to us, so we can't ask them for any kind of verification, even though they're going to lie anyway, or whatever the story that come out. But we want to be credible, we want to be respectable, so we try to provide them for right to reply. The case is how we can make sure our stories are right. We have to have lots of different sources of information, not just relying on one source. And when we train our journalists or citizen journalists, we always tell them just rely on one source. You need to talk to lots of people. But for them, I mean, the security is the most important thing. They can expose themselves working for the Democratic Rights of Burma. Even somebody suspect they are in big danger. There are lots of problems, lots of issues that we have to think about.
Have you ever been called in to protect your journalists?
Yes. For example, right after the coup, we've got like 7 journalists who were arrested, and some of them were badly tortured. And that was a pretty tricky situation. When the military coup happened, I was out of Burma. And I was, in fact, the only one out of Burma. And the rest of my colleagues were all inside the country. And the military is stepping up pressure on journalists, arresting journalists. And the question is, what do we do? Should we start reporting to protect ourselves for our own security? Or should we keep on reporting? It means you could get arrested, you could get tortured, you could even get killed during reporting and in prison. And that was a big, tough discussion and also the decision to be made. And we decided that we have to report and we have to covering the military crackdown and uprising in Burma. We go ahead with that. And some of them pay the price for that. But as a media organization, this is a time we have to play our role, reporting on what's happening and the brutalities by the military. And some of our colleagues and my colleagues were badly tortured, but still some of them were released. And we still have one reporter who is still being detained in prison in Burma.
I think that it's important to bring attention to the treatment of journalists by the military, not only the torture and the detention. I know I speak for many people that these issues should not be ignored and pressure should be put on this junta to release all journalists from captivity. It's just an abomination of what is happening. I'm sure it's very difficult for you because these are your colleagues and your friends.
That's a very important statement. If the government or the military or whoever control the country start targeting the journalists, you are silencing the voices of the people. That's a big thing. And it's a scary thing, like everywhere the journalists are being targeted. And if you kill the voice of the journalists, then you kill everyone's voices. There were like 200 journalists were arrested since after the coup. Still about 50 of journalists are still being in prison. The military is becoming more and more harsher. Back into one journalist were arrested, a filmmaker, and she was sentenced to life imprisonment. She wasn't even doing for politics. She was doing a social life for the people. And that's an example that military dictatorship want to bring to people. If you do this, you could end up in prison for life.
Yes. As you rightly point out, the risks are very high and people are paying those price of those risks. But at the same juncture, you're also pointing out the need to continue to report is also critically important. How does DVB balance this role of very high risks with the role of trying to carve and protect democratic space in the ongoing situation in Myanmar and Burma? How have you felt is the best way to go about finding this balance and at the same time pushing for democratic space?
We always tell our reporter or journalists, your security is the most important. If you get arrested, your voice is going to be silenced. The first thing is you need to think about your own security, not to take the risk. Having said that, we also have to do and cover the story what's happening. The balance in between the risks and the job that you have to do is delicate. Everyone understands how important the role we play. We are bringing out lots of issues that otherwise nobody will talk about. For example, in Burma today, there are millions of internally displaced persons, people running away from their home, their village, their town, their cities because of the conflict in the area. Activists are being targeted by the military and arrested daily. And there are lots of injustice done by the military. And if we don't talk about it, who's going to talk about it? That's how we have to expand our space. And the most important thing, what we believe, is we bringing hope to people in this kind of terrible tragedies that everybody is facing. Then if you lose the hope, you can't survive any longer. So I think the media that we play, the thing that we talk every day on the TV, on the radio, on the social media, in the end, it's bringing hope. Things are happening. People are trying to get for freedom. People are not giving up. Lots of people have resilience. And that's bring hope for the people inside Burma.
This point you're making about resilience. DVB has been resilient as a media organization. Myanmar is resilient as it's facing these horrific crimes that are taking place inside the society by the junta and the conflicts, the real challenges to everyday living that people are facing. Looking at the crisis in Myanmar, 4 years since the coup, what can be realistically done to make progress now? If you had a voice of pushing forward, what would be the key steps that you think need to be pushed forward?
Back into Malaysia. Malaysia is now like the chair of the ASEAN countries. And the ASEAN has adopted this 5-point consensus since 2021 after the coup. And none of the points were implemented. That include like humanitarian assistance, release of political prisoners, and the dialogue, and none of the points were implemented. Now it's more than 4 years. We want more than that 5 points, but even that 5 point hasn't been implemented. And I think Malaysia play a key role as a democratic country compared to lots of other ASEAN members, can play a big role to implementing those points and pushing it. Anytime in history in Burma, this is a tangible period that the military might fall. They have already lost 50% of the country. And the rest of the 50% that they control is not in control. And now we see a lot of people used to say Burmese army is the strongest institution in Burma. And we have been arguing, no, it wasn't. It was just a hollow institution. Inside, it's a crippling. And that's what we're seeing now. They are crippling, falling apart. The only thing that unites them is what you call common structure. It's a fear within the army. People are scared, even in the army themselves. Everybody is scared and following the order. But there is no principle, there is no ethic, there is no regulation that unite them. Only the fear that unite them. But now we're seeing it. The soldiers are running away from the army, and now they're forcing young people to get into the army, forcing them to fight for them. It's just a matter of time. The military will fall completely, but we need to push further. This is a time that really possible.
In a recent presentation I gave talking about the region, I highlighted this was a very pivotal year for Myanmar, Burma. You have to begin from a conscious awareness that there are multiple sovereignties in the country, and the military is now very much on the back foot, which is you're describing here. The military as an institution is weakening and rotting from within with desperation. And this is something that is very real. Let's close in this conversation to talk about what role that the media can play now. It is a very challenging year for Myanmar. At the same time as you face the challenges of finances and the reporters face the frontline challenges on the ground, what key role do you see DVB playing as the country moves forward?
I think the freedom of speech is the most important thing that we play, not just now, but also in the future, even when we have a democratic government. The freedom of speech will play pretty much an important role wherever we are. That's the space that we are trying to play. And nowadays, especially with the internet and social media, with lots of fake news, lots of disinformation, lots of propaganda, for example, the independent media play even more important role. For young people, it's very hard to know who to believe. There are all sides of information that are coming up. People will bring you into different directions. In that kind of situation, the independent media, which is unbiased and not pulled by any government or the military or business, it's really crucial for the general public. Otherwise, people will have problem believing anyone. And we have to build ourselves into that kind of position that we are credible, we are ethical, and we're not controlled by anyone.
This has been Chan Yang speaking about the need for freedom of speech, the need to hope and maintain hope, the need to engender and help the young people dig through the mess of misinformation in this current age, and the need for change in Burma. Chan Yang, thank you so much for being here on Straight Talk Southeast Asia.
Thank you, Bridget. Thank you for having me on your show.
Thank you for listening to the episode. Subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast listening app. If you'd like to keep up to date on current Southeast Asian political affairs, just keep following. This is Bridget Welsh, and I look forward to connecting to you in the next episode. Straight Talk Southeast Asia is produced by Norman Chella, aka Norm, and you can find him at that'sthenorm.com. Thanks so much for listening.